You're tuned in to RBLR, the home of Tampa Bay's Reveler Sports.
4 seconds left. In front. Happy moment. The Tampa Bay Lightning have won the first Stanley Cup. And the Tampa Bay Lightning have won the Stanley Cup. Lightning strikes twice. The Tampa Bay Lightning win their second straight Stanley Cup.
Welcome into RBLR Lightning. My name is Chris. Where the Lightning have struggled lately, we'll get into all that and more here as we talk on this podcast. And here with me tonight to talk about all the frustration that the Bolts have been putting us through lately is Mr. Jake Ricker. Jake, how are you feeling? I know you were very frustrated.
Yeah, I'm feeling good. You know what? It's been a little bit of a rough patch here on this West Coast road trip, but every team goes through their slumps. And when you're the two-time defending back-to-back Stanley Cup champions, even the smallest of slumps can get extremely frustrating. But hey, we've got a full schedule of Lightning hockey right now, so I am thankful for that and excited to be talking about it with you today.
Yeah, and I'd rather slump now than slump come playoff time. It's
Absolutely.
bound to happen. We've played a lot of games in the past 2 seasons, and I know we've brought that up a lot. So a little bit of wear and tear on the Bolts here as we get deeper and deeper into this season. And this has been a really tough road trip. So we'll get into the games here in a second. Not major news going on, but Alex Killorn, 700 career games now. Obviously a guy who's played a big role for the Bolts. You know, he's that guy that'll get in front of the net for you, get the tips, play a little gritty on the ice too, and stand up for his teammates. We all know Alex Killorn. He's a very streaky player, but he's third on the team this year in goals with 18. So he's had a really, really good season this year. Like I said, we've seen him be streaky in the past, but seems to be pretty consistent play from Killorn this year. So Jake, this is pretty cool for Killorn hitting 700 games. Obviously, he's been a big part of the Bolts back-to-back Stanley Cup run.
Yeah, huge. And it's funny. So many people talked about him possibly being the guy that gets traded at the trade deadline for the past 2 years. Yet he's stuck around. He's been a solid player, as you mentioned. He's kind of gotten away from that inconsistency, which is awesome. He's on pace right now to have one of his best season that he's ever had in his career. So that's huge for him. Hopefully this keeps up and he can break some of those records. But to get to 700 games is a huge accomplishment for him. Not many guys make it up that far, and especially the fact that he's done it with one team in the Lightning is also awesome to see. So big shout out to Alex Killorn, the influencer, as people like to call him. That's also been a huge part of him. He's not only a great player on the ice too, but he's a lot of fun for the fans, which, may not seem that important, but that's always nice to have that guy that a lot of fans can get behind and enjoy the things he does. He's great in the locker room and kind of lightens the mood sometimes, I'm sure, when, things maybe get too serious or something like that, which can happen in locker rooms. So it's good to have those kind of a balance of players, that are strict and can get the team back on track when needed, and guys like Alex Killorn who can also have a lot of fun and be serious when needed. So Alex Killorn has really been the full package for the Lightning for so many years. So good for him at getting 700 games. And hey, here's to many more as well.
Yeah, I really hope we can keep Killorn around. He's definitely been an underrated player, man. Like I said, I talked about the streakiness for him, but when he can play, and he's a very good leader on the team. So I'd definitely like to keep Killorn around, and congratulations on him for 700 games. So we do have this big West Coast road trip that we talked about last week, and we're going to get into the games here. This first game against the Jets, it was, going into it, I know the Jets have a lot of firepower with Scheifele and those guys on the ice, but the Lightning in this game, once again, we fell behind early and fast. It was 2-0 very quickly in this game. And for some reason, that just seems to be the Achilles heel for the Bolts lately. Is just falling behind early and having to come back. And when you're constantly having to play from behind, you're going to be committing dumb penalties because you're going to be trying to play a lot more aggressive. And you're going to be giving teams more chances on the power play. And you're going to be down men in those kind of games. So I think it's going to be really key for the Bolts to really got to get on the scoreboard first. And once again, in this game, we weren't able to do that. And we allowed Winnipeg to score 7 goals. And I thought when this game started, it was going to be one of those games where I'm like, okay, it's going to be, 3-3 early, and then we're going to slow things down. But no, Winnipeg was able to put on 4 goals in the third period on us. The power play, once again, went 0 for 3. We've talked about this power play, and we can get into that here in a second. But Jake, what did you see in this game that really caused the Bolts to give up 7 goals?
Well, you mentioned a couple of things, right? The slow start is one of the biggest ones. We talked about that in the last episode. It's continued here again, where they are not starting on time. I know they're on the West Coast and they're not used to these late starts. Heck, I can barely stay awake for the start of these games either when they're starting this late, but that's no excuse. The late start has been a major issue. I mean, they went down 3-0 within just a couple of, in the first 10 minutes of this game. Or sorry, it was 3-1 because McDonough did get a goal in there. But still, you go down 3-1 so early. It's not a recipe for success. Now, luckily, the Lightning were able to batter their way back and tie this game. But then really this time it was closing out the third period. They started playing sloppy defensively. They let the Jets, get a lot of odd man rushes, get behind them. And there's only so much Vasilevsky can do because let me tell you something, he is not the problem. I know that's for sure. But, that third period was the biggest issue there I saw because they were able to come back in the first period and at least tie it 3-3. And you're thinking, okay, we're at least tied here. It wasn't a great start, but we're basically starting a new game here in the second period. And then everything fell apart in the third, which is just, you can't have that happen. And you mentioned the power play. That's probably the biggest thing. I mean, you cannot go 0 for 3 on the power play. You want to get at least one power play goal in there somewhere. They were good in the face-off circle. They won over 50% of their face-offs, which is good. Usually it's been an area where they've struggled. But is some of these defensive mistakes they've had has been a big issue for them, and that was the biggest reason for this game. And again, it was on the West Coast. You're thinking, all right, well, it was the first West Coast game. Maybe things can get back normal the next couple of games, but the problem is they didn't.
They didn't at all, and you're right. And it was just a really sloppy game from start to finish. And I think it could have been the West Coast benefit of the doubt as far as the time zone goes. I was like, okay, well, we'll start this series bad and we'll come back. But overall, the defense, man, just the odd man rushes the defense has been giving up lately, or just leaving Vasi out dry, man. And we see the saves Vasi makes, but he can only do that so much, as you brought up. So the defense has to play a better game. I'm not really sure what's going on with the defense. I know our defensemen have been on the blue line a lot, taking a lot of shots. So it just seems to be some sloppy passes. The cross ice passes, we're kind of getting back into the habit of the cross ice passes instead of going north to south. I think the Lightning are better when we do north to south than when we go east to west. So not a good way to start this road trip. Obviously, giving up 7 goals is something the Bolts don't do often. You will not see Vasi give up that many goals in a game very often. So I think this game was just a sign of things to come, I guess, because as we rolled into the next game here against the Flames, the first game against the Flames this year was a great game. It felt like a Stanley Cup game from the 0-3-0-4 matchup. Lots of goals and lots of back and forth in that one. But once again in this game, the Lightning were behind and we were not able to come back again. We fell behind early in this one to Calgary again. We were only able to put up 1 goal. Calgary was able to score 4. Once again, the power play just didn't look good in this game. 0 for 3 again. This power play, man, I'm just going to go ahead and say it's 0 for 12 in the past 4 games. So that's not a good sign, man. And we keep talking about the power play here and what needs to improve. And one thing I was observing I was thinking maybe take one of your star players off of the ice and replace him with, maybe you could get a guy like Kachuk out there and just kind of mix it up a little bit. Maybe it's too much firepower on the ice because it seems to be that Cooch, Stammer, Hedman, those guys just really want to pass a lot. And I think they're really trying to set up sometimes for the perfect play. And I don't think that's what the Bolts need to do. We've had some success firing away from the blue line. So once again, the power play, 0 for 3 in this game. And I think that's the reason, again, that we weren't able to win this game, down 4-1. Tough game, man. Tough game. Another tough game for Vasi. Another tough game for the defense. Not to take anything away from Calgary. I think Calgary played great in this game. They were able to capitalize on their opportunities that were given to them. So, Jake, what did you see in this Calgary game? Obviously, the power play, going 0 for 3 again is definitely a bummer.
Forget the power play. The biggest issue in this game was the second period. The Lightning were tied 1-1, when Killorn scored in that second period. They didn't get off to the greatest start, but it was at least somewhat better than we had seen in previous games. So 1-1 in that second period. And then literally in the final minute, they let Calgary score back-to-back goals. And next thing you know, they're now down 3-1. That's unacceptable. You cannot, getting goals scored on you in the last minute is terrible because it's deflating to a team. It's frustrating. You don't want to see that ever, but to let it happen twice in the span of 52. I mean, the last goal was at 1952.
Right.
Seconds left in the period. That is something that you cannot let happen. I mean, heck, look at the Lightning did to Montreal in the Stanley Cup Finals when Coleman scored that last second goal in the second period. That ultimately turned the tide of that game and gave the Lightning a huge leg up on that second home game in the Stanley Cup Finals. That's what happened in this game. Calgary took advantage of the Lightning being lackadaisical in the last minute of that second period, and it cost them. It is ultimately what cost them the game. Calgary ended up scoring, again in the third period to make it 4-1. But, you think about it, if they don't score those last two goals in that last minute of the second period, it's a 1-1 game going to the third period. Completely different hockey game. And the Lightning don't have to be so aggressive in the third period like they did. So that was the biggest issue I had with this game. And then to go to the power play, as you talked about, you're right. They're passing too much. They're trying to pass. Sure, when Kucherov is able to make that clean pass through the middle to Stamkos, he has a wide open net and he scores 9 out of 10 times. It's a beautiful play. It's a great play when it works. But that's the key, right? When it works. I've seen a lot recently where Kuch is trying to force that pass through the middle. Stamkos can't handle it. And by the time he regains control of that puck, either somebody's on him and he has to move it, or the goaltender's already over there and it's an easy save. Those plays just are not working, and they're constantly moving it around the point, in that kind of triangle formation, and nothing is opening, and they're not shooting the puck. They've got to shoot more. Trying that play every once in a while is great, but they've got to get away from that. It's like they say, put the puck on net and good things will happen. It's one of the most famous sayings in hockey, and they're not doing that right now. I like your idea of maybe trying to break it up a little bit, maybe put Stamkos or Kucherov on the second unit so you spread out that firepower a little bit. That could help. Maybe the Lightning go after a power play specialist at the trade deadline, which we get into a minute, but something's got to change because that power play is a major issue, and it got worse for the Lightning later on too, but something's got to change. They're making way too many passes, and you've got to convert on some of these chances.
Way too much firepower on this team to not be to be scoring on the power play. You know what I mean?
Exactly.
You got plenty of firepower, plenty of guys.
You have Nikita Kucherov and Steven Stamkos.
Right.
How are you not scoring
on
the
top
power
of Braden
play?
Point and on top of guys like Victor Hedman out there who can easily score, 20, 30 goals a season. So, and one other thing in this game was, early on in the first period, I believe the Lightning had a 5-on-3, and we were outshot by Calgary, I believe, on that power play. They just really couldn't get anything going, and you could kind of tell it's like, what are we doing, guys? Like, we cannot be giving up shots on a 5-on-3. Like a 5-on-3, man, you got to take advantage of that. That means there's almost two guys open every time. So someone's got to be making better moves. I think sometimes the Bolts really struggle to get the puck across the blue line and get the forecheck going. Sometimes that passing back, that drop back pass we do is frustrating. When it works, it's great. But when it doesn't, man, it usually results in an odd man rush on a power play. So Jake, as you know, these first two games of this road trip, right, were 0 for 6 on the power play. Did you expect Cooper to make any kind of line changes? Were you surprised that he didn't?
I mean, when you have guys like we mentioned, when you have that power play unit of Hedman, Point, Kucherov, Stamkos, you expect them to figure it out. So I'm not shocked that he didn't make a change because I don't think I even would have done that. Because again, those are some of the top scorers in the NHL. You'd think they'd figure it out. But it's also gotten to the point now where it's like, maybe we do need to see a change because it's clearly not working. It didn't get any better in the Edmonton game, which we're going to get to in just a second. But it's an issue. So I'm not surprised Cooper didn't make the changes. Listen, I trust Cooper. Cooper has been a fantastic coach, as we all know, for so many years. He's been one of the best coaches in the NHL. And he did start to make line changes later in this road trip when things continued to get worse. But the power play is something now maybe we would like to see a change. And I don't think it's still the same as of right now, as far as I know. I don't know how that will change tomorrow when the Lightning take on the Kraken. But I don't know. They've got to do something about it because it is not working, and it is a major issue.
Yep, it's definitely a big deal for all that firepower on the ice, man. Someone's got to be scoring, man. That's too many good guys. Like, if you ask around the league and you're asking any kind of fan, they're like, man, you got Stamkos, Cooch, Hedman point on one power play. Like, how are you not scoring goals? So it's obviously been the biggest issue for this team this year. And we talked about how we thought it was going to get fixed with a little more consistent play and the guys actually healing up and finally getting time to get things going. But man, something's got to be done. You know, whether it's just Cooper telling them to fire away and stop the fancy passes, or maybe mixing it up a little bit, like we talked about, putting Stammer on the second line, putting Cooch on the second line. So moving on to this Edmonton game, once again, the Bolts were down early again. It seems to be our kryptonite, down 1-0 really early in this game. This was a weird game, man. Edmonton had 7 power plays. So I don't know if we give props to the PK or you know, it's Edmonton went 0 for 7. So the PK somewhat did their job, I guess. We still weren't able to win this game. We lost 4-1. McDavid was able to get on the scoreboard again twice. He did that last time we played him here. So McDavid seems to be our kryptonite too, as far as stopping him goes. We have issues containing him and his speed. Man, you know, I hate to blame refs and officials all the time, but man, giving a team 7 power plays, you know, I know the Bolts have been struggling. I'm sure, you know, back-to-back losses for the first time, I believe, since 2017, if I'm not mistaken. They were probably frustrated coming into this game, like, man, this is not something that we do. So I think coming into this game, I thought, all right, you know, it's time. Like, we're not going to lose 3 in a row, but man, we did. Man, like I said, I hate to blame the refs, but I think the refs played a big role in this game. I hate to see a team get seven power plays and they still weren't able to capitalize on them, and we still lost this game. So, Jake, what was your frustration in this Edmonton game?
Well, I have to disagree with you on the refs. There were definitely some bad calls in this game, like the one where Hedman got called for, I believe they called him for elbowing on Connor McDavid. That was a really bad call. But I say this all the time. Good teams find good ways to win. Listen, you're going to get bad calls. You're going to get frustrating times, and sometimes it can be worse than others. But when you're getting 7 penalties, there's also an issue with the team itself. The Lightning cannot be taking that many penalties because there were some that were rightfully called. Again, not all of them were good calls. There's no question about that. But the Lightning have way bigger issues than the penalties, because if you're taking 7 penalties in a game, that's a problem. You can't be doing that. If you're going to give Connor McDavid that many chances to score, which he did on one of them, he got one of the power play goals. It was, I believe, late during the power play. But that's just unacceptable. Absolutely unacceptable. And this is the game that I think frustrated me the most out of this entire road trip. I was furious watching this game because we had Brian Elliott in net for this game, and he was fantastic. I've been so happy with Brian Elliott and the way he's performed this year, but he was huge in this game. He had 45 saves on 48 shots. One, that's way too many shots to be given a team in the first place. The defense clearly not working out. But when your backup goaltender is making that many saves and keeping your team in it for the longest time, I mean, this game could have been 7-0 easily by the end of the second period, but it was only 2-0 because Elliott was making save after save. And he was a huge part of the penalty kill as well. Because as we say, one of your best penalty killers is your goaltender. Brian Elliott was so good in this game, and the Lightning, they kept taking penalties. They couldn't get anything done. They were giving up odd man rushes, leaving Elliott out to dry. I mean, I just don't understand where the effort was in this game. This was by far one of the worst games the Lightning played on this road trip. And, you know, listen, losing back-to-back games stinks. That was the first time we had done it all seasons, and nothing really to worry about it. But then you drop 3 in a row and you let your goalie hang out to dry like that. I mean, this was a major wake-up call, I think, to the Lightning. And luckily, I think they did get the message in the next game, which we'll talk about. But this was a terrible game for the Lightning. This was probably the most concerning one, because especially too, even on the empty netter, when the Lightning were trying to pull the goalie and make something happen, the puck eventually is cleared down the ice, and an Edmonton player was the one that beat everybody else out to the puck and put it into the empty net. How is there not somebody hustling back to get to that puck? I mean, come on. I mean, you're just dropped 2 games. You know, you've been frustrated. You know, things aren't going well, and nobody's hustling back to that puck. And you're telling me you're letting everybody beat you like that? Last I checked, when you're in the offensive zone, you have 2 defenders up. You're the highest ones back. It should be pretty easy for you to get back and hustle and get to that play, but nobody hustled, and they let Edmonton get that free empty net goal, which ultimately put the game out of reach when they were still in it because of Brian Elliott. and
Right.
then just threw it away. So this game was extremely frustrating. 0 for 4 on the power play. Penalty kill was good for the most part, but you cannot be taking that many penalties, even if the refs are making bad calls. Because even still, let's say there were 3 bad calls in this game.
Right.
That's still 5 penalties.
Right.
That's unacceptable. So this was a bad game. A little of a rant there for me because I was extremely frustrated with this game. It wasn't good. I don't think there's anything positive to talk about from this game at all.
It's good to feel the fire and the energy from you, man. I love it. I like it. Keep up the spark, man. No, you're right. Elliott, 45 saves in this game, man. Jesus, like, what else did you want the guy to do? You know, the Lightning were just the defense lately just been really out of position, just creating odd man rushes. And the Bolts really lately, man, the odd man rushes have just been abysmal, man. You're allowing all these 2-on-1s and 3-on-1s and bad line changes at wrong times and just sloppy puck play overall in this losing streak that we were on in this West Coast trip. So at this point, you're 0 for 7 on the power play, 8 on the power play in 3 games. So, man, the power play once again in this game was just not good. I don't. At this point, when I was watching, I was like, man, what do we do with the power play? You know, I'm getting frustrated. Kind of wishing at this point Cooper would have made some sort of change, but like you said, it's hard to do when you got guys like Cooch, Stamkos. Point, you figure, man, sometime this puck's going to go in the back of the net. When you got those kind of guys on the ice, like something's got to give, but they just can't seem to get the puck settled down and get things going and get clear shots. I think a lot of it's just like we talked about, too much passing, man. When we see the Lightning shoot, good things happen. We have a lot of good shooters. You know, the defense have been playing well from the blue line. So, Jake, in this game, as far as the power play goes, did you see the same consistent issues in this game as far as the first 2 games go on this West Coast trip?
Yeah, too many passes. They're not taking advantage of it. I believe when you were talking about the 5-on-3, I believe this was the game that we had that 5-on-3, and they barely even made an attempt during that. I mean, they had a couple of good, and credit to the Oilers goaltender who I have trouble pronouncing his name, but
Markstrom.
He was good. Was it Kosekinen? I think it is for Edmonton.
Yeah.
Yeah. He made a lot of good saves in this game, so credit to him, credit where credit is due. But when you have a 5-on-3 for 2 minutes and you've got, again, your top unit out there, something's got to happen. I mean, if I was John Cooper personally, and again, John Cooper is obviously way smarter than I am, but he knows what he's doing.
Never know, man.
But if I was John Cooper, I would literally just say, okay, for this entire practice, everybody's practicing the power play. That's all we are doing. And whoever can score and it would be good, that's who's going to play on the power play the next game. Because I'm almost at a loss for words at this point. I really don't know what the issue is when you're struggling that much. But you're absolutely right. Something has to change with that power play because it's an issue. You cannot be going. What are we at now? 0 for 13 is what 12, I think we said at the beginning. Yeah,
12,
it cannot happen. I don't know. This game, though, boy, it was not pretty. That's for sure. But hey, at least Elliott looks fantastic. And we're going to need him continue down this stretch. The Lightning still have, I believe, 1 more back-to-back this month, and they're going to have 3 more the next month. So they're going to need Elliott in a couple of these games coming up. And he was great. He was fantastic. I really was happy with what I saw from him. It was just too bad that he was hung out to dry. Oh, the other thing I wanted to say, too, about this game, Chris, you mentioned the odd man rushes. Right. You know what a big part of that is? It's when the Lightning get down early, then they start to make their defensemen. The Lightning defensemen love to jump up on the play in a normal situation. But when they start to go down and it's late in the third period and they need a goal, the defensemen get even more aggressive. And when you have Victor Hedman standing basically at the net, that's when those odd man rushes start to happen a lot more often. And it happened in this game. So the Lightning have got to start on time, because if they can start on time, you're going to see a lot less of those situations where they have to send those defensemen up on the play. And you're less likely for a forward to be out of position and not know what to do and then have an odd man rush created. So that is also part of the problem, is starting on time. That should limit some of those odd man rushes.
This was the Bolts' first 3-game losing streak in a very, very long time, so it's not something we're used to recently. Elliott was definitely the MVP of this game in my eyes, even though we took a loss. I think Elliott's past 2 starts have been really good, so that is a good sign to come with a couple back-to-backs coming up to finish the season off, because every win's going to count from here on out. We're coming down to the final stretch, so like you said, guys like Elliott filling in on his night. If we can get wins on those nights, that's a free 2 points almost, because you can get a win with your backup goalie. That is huge, especially with a guy like Bassey on the bench. So speaking of finally getting on the scoreboard first, the Bolts were able to do that here against Vancouver. We actually went up 2-0 the first period, Jake. 2-0. When was the last time you saw the Lightning go up 2-0 in the first period of a game? You felt like things were going to be good. They're going to be great. Yes, the Bolts did end up winning this game thanks to Vasilevsky bailing us out. Huge game from Bassey. The Canucks, they outshot us 36-31 in this game. I thought Vancouver played a pretty good game. Last time they played us, it was tough too. Vancouver's been hot as of late, the second half of the season, sort of towards the end of the first half. Once they made that coaching move. So we were able to finally come away with a win and end the 3-game skid, but 2-1 is a close game. So like I said, Bassey definitely bailed us out in this one with 35 saves on 36 shots. Hedman was able to get on the scoreboard for us, and then Colton early, and that was it. Bolts pretty much played shut down the rest of the game, allowing a little too many shots. And once again, the power play was 0 for 2 again. So like we talked about, this would put us at 0 for 12 in 4 games from the power play. So, the power play is still frustrating, and we're able to come away with the victory. So, I'll take the 2 points in this game because this was a game we needed to win. Obviously, heading up, we have another game against Seattle tomorrow, and then we'll finally be back home. So, Jake, how are you feeling after the Bolts were able to finally get back in the win column and secure 2 points here against the Canucks?
Well, after that 2-0 start, I had to pinch myself to make sure I hadn't fallen asleep and was dreaming, because I was like, holy cow, who is this Lightning team? But it was great. Amen. They finally got off to a great start, and they played pretty good in the first period for the most part. The second period wasn't awful either. Listen, was this a perfect win by any means? No, not even close. But we were on a 3-game skid. They got the job done at the end of the day and got the 2 points. So I will absolutely take this. This was a nice win to have. Vasilevsky was huge. They got off to a good start and played some good defensive hockey in certain points. So, and the penalty kill was also very good. That's been the one bright spot in special teams. The penalty kill has been good, even though we've been taking way too many penalties. So listen, I'm happy. I'm very happy about this win. And I know it sounds like we're complaining, yet we've won 2 back-to-back Stanley Cups. There's not much to be complaining about overall. But we complain and talk about this stuff because we love these guys and we want to see them succeed. That's why it gets, even more frustrating, even at the smallest or slightest little bit of bumps that the Lightning hit. But this was a big win. Big win to get on the West Coast road trip, gives them some confidence. They've now had 2 days off as of this recording when they're going to play, as you mentioned, Seattle tomorrow. So hopefully they're acclimated to this West Coast now, and they'll be ready to go for that game against Seattle, and they can continue this and get back on a little bit of a winning streak.
Yeah, and as you mentioned, the PK, you're sitting at 14th in the league at 80%, so not too bad, kind of hanging around the middle of the pack. Obviously, the power play needs to improve, sitting at 19th at 19.8%. So you would think a team with this much firepower would be sitting at a lot better spot, at maybe top 10, top 5 in the league. So the power play has to get going. I think that's going to be the key moving forward. I was really glad we were able to secure this win against Vancouver because, man, if we went on a 4-game skid, we were going to see the Fire Cooper tweets, chants coming back out, and the pitchforks, and everybody be in the road, screaming Fire Cooper, sell the team, whatever else how they were bad-mouthing him a couple years ago. We went on, we lost to Columbus. It got swept. So I think that's all I had for the couple games. We do have the trade deadline coming up where I don't think the Bolts have enough, cap space to make any kind of moves. Is it possible? Sure. We've seen the Bolts make moves in the past. So, Jake, what do you have as far as trade deadline info for us here?
So according to Cap Friendly, the Lightning have exactly $0 of cap space. And I'm not kidding when I say that. It's not like, oh, there's just a little bit, like 100,000. They literally have $0 in cap space. So for every dollar that they take in, it has to go out as well. So it will be very difficult to make moves during this trade deadline. It is possible, though, thanks to something we saw the Lightning do last year in the 3-team trades when they acquired David Savard, for example. And they basically in a 3-team trade, you get, player A gets sent to, a different team. They retain 50%. And then that other team sends that player to the Lightning. They also retain 50%. So technically you're getting a 75% retention on that team's salary. So you can start to knock off a lot of money on guys' big salaries. But even with that, The Lightning, again, are going to have to send somebody out. And for the most part, the Lightning don't want to send out a lot of their guys. They've all been huge for us and been playing really well. So, you've got a couple of guys that are expendable at maybe $700,000 cap hit, 850 for the defense. So still very, very little money that can be moved around for the Lightning. One guy, though, that I am looking at that I think can be, and even Jay Fresh on Twitter, if anybody knows him, I'm sure a lot of hockey fans follow him. He said this as well. He said the David Savard of this year, it could be Justin Braun. And I actually like him a lot. He has a very small cap hit of 1.8 million. The Lightning would still have to do a 2-team trade to even make this work. That shows you how little money that they actually have. But if you do a 2-team trade, you could make Justin Braun work, and you could send, I don't know, maybe Zach Bogosian or Cal Foote, one of those two guys, depending on what the Flyers want, what would work, all that kind of stuff. But he's a guy that could actually work. He's got 5 goals, 10 assists for 15 points on the year. He's not a huge guy that jumps at you on the score sheet like a Mark Giordano or anything like that, but he's a solid right-handed defenseman, which is something the Lightning desperately need right now. So he is a guy that I would love to see the Lightning go after and possibly get. Again, it's very difficult because you're going to have to give out a lot to get teams to take on money for you. When the Lightning got David Savard, they had to give up a first-round pick. So you're going to have to give up a lot to make this trade work. But he is somebody that I'm definitely looking at as a possibility for the Lightning to do, because I think defensive depth is probably the biggest issue for the Lightning. We've talked about the odd man rushes, right? That have been a big issue. The team's putting up a lot of shots, like against Edmonton, where the Lightning gave up 46 shots on net in that game. So defense is probably my biggest concern. I know power play has been an issue, but that's something that can be easily fixed internally. So that's something I'd like to see the Bolts try and do at the trade deadline, or maybe something similar. But again, there's not much you can do because you can't go get a Mark Giordano from Seattle because it's just physically not possible. You would have to give up an Eric Cernak or something like that, and I don't know if that's something the Lightning really want to do. I mean, maybe it is something that you want to do, but it's a lot harder to work out. Other than that, though, I mean, you could try and find somebody that's a power play specialist. But again, it's so difficult because basically the biggest cap hit they can have is $3 million if you're going to do a 2-team trade. And even that's cutting it real close. So there's not a ton of options out there for the forward group. But I think the biggest issue for the Lightning is defense. So Justin Braun is the name that's popped up the most for me when looking at that trade deadline. We'll see if the Lightning make some moves, but I would not be surprised to see if they stand pat and go with the team they have at the trade deadline. But, last 2 years, they've made moves at the deadline to really push themselves over the top, and it's worked. So I wouldn't be surprised also if JBB decides to work his magic and make a move.
It's weird because, the defense has seemed to struggle this year. And our defense is, pretty much the same from last year. And I don't know what the issue is. It seemed to be giving up a lot of odd man rushes, which are really frustrating. And when you do that, man, you're just going to be behind the games you are. Vasi can only bail you out so much. So I think defense is the biggest thing here. I agree with you. If it's possible at all to make a move, I'm all for it. Cal Foote just hasn't wowed me yet. I hate to give up on someone early, but if we're trying to make a run at a 3-peat and we need to make that move for that to happen, the time to win is now. And getting rid of a guy like Foote, if that's what it takes, or a guy like Bogosian, I'm okay with it. I'd rather have a 3-peat. And then, obviously the Lightning are going to have to rebuild at some point. But if we can get a 3-peat, we got the talent to do it right now. If we need to make a move, I'm fine with it. I trust the organization and the moves we've made in the past to get guys like McDonough and Savard who've played key roles for the Bolts come playoff time. So like I said, I'm with you. I think, like you said, the cap's going to be the biggest issue for the Bolts. But if we make a move, we make a move. You know what? I'm just going to go with it and roll with the punches because we know what to do. So trade deadline will be coming up here next week before we talk. So, it's just a lot. Everyone pay attention, man. Keep your eyes out, keep your ears listening, and the Bolts could be making a move. So we do have 2 games coming up before we talk next Tuesday. Obviously, we're finishing off this West Coast trip against the Kraken. This will be the first time we are playing in Seattle. Obviously, the Kraken are not what the Vegas Knights were. They are struggling in their first season, sitting at 18-37, 42 points pretty much bottom of the barrel in the NHL. You know, they're really struggling to get things going out there. So I would like to say that the Bolts are able to pick up a victory here, but we've really struggled on this road trip. And then we have a home game, finally, one of our 5 home games we have coming up here against the Rangers. So that will be a tough test back home Saturday night here at 8 o'clock. So the Bolts will be in the black uniforms here. Love the black uniforms. I know a lot of people say they can't see the numbers, but really enjoy the black uniforms. Would be okay with them being our permanent. I am a huge fan. Just wanted to say that. So Jake, coming up in these 2 games, what do you want to see from the Bolts for these next 2 games, man? Obviously, the power play has to improve. Do you see Cooper making any kind of moves for these next 2 games? Do you think the power play, he's just going to let it ride?
I want to see a win. That's what I want to see.
I know that.
No, I'm kidding. Listen, power play, as we talked about multiple times on this episode so far, is the biggest thing. I like the idea of maybe making a change. I don't know if that's going to happen.
Right.
Cooper is usually a guy that likes to stick to his guns for the most part, so maybe he mixes it up a little bit on the second unit. I don't know. We'll have to wait and see here. But power play's got to get better. That's the biggest thing that's got to change. And just start on time. That's the biggest thing. Do what you did in the Vancouver game. Just make it a little more consistent for a little bit longer. You know, try to build off that win that you got in Vancouver. That's the biggest thing. And then obviously coming home is going to be a huge help. It's being on the road for so long. Unfortunately, they're going to have to go right back on the road again and do another long road trip. But, think about it this way. Get the win, have that confidence coming home for at least that one home game here in Tampa, and then get sent back off on the road with another win, hopefully. So Seattle's a very winnable game as well. Listen, as you mentioned, Seattle's not a good team, but as I always say all the time, you can't underestimate them whatsoever. So you've got to put your best foot forward in every single one of these games, but start on time and fix the power play. I don't care what you have to do, if even there's some voodoo magic involved or something like that. I don't know. But those are the 2 biggest things for sure that I'd like to see changed or improved on in these next 2 games. And then, hey, once we get through this month, we'll have a lot of nice home games to finish the season off on.
I'm looking forward to getting off this West Coast time, because another 10 o'clock start tomorrow is going to be the struggle again. You know, been falling asleep for most of these games and having to catch recaps and stuff like that, having to be up early for work. So I will be glad to get back to a 8 o'clock start time. I'm glad this West Coast trip is coming to an end. Let's hope that we can end it on a positive note against Seattle. I just look for them to go out there, like you said, get ahead early, play fast at the beginning. We know the Bolts can play fast. It's just sometimes, man, I don't know why they have these slow starts, and it's frustrating when you got so much firepower on the ice and guys that know what it takes to get it done. So I agree with you, though. I think Cooper's just going to let things ride. That's how he coaches. He trusts our system. It's got us 2 back-to-back cups. So I think I think we should beat Seattle. We really should. If we lose to Seattle, I'm going to be upset, because Seattle is definitely a winnable game. Let's end this West Coast trip on a positive note and get back home against the Rangers. So before we close out here, going to take a quick look around the league. The Bolts are currently sitting at 2nd place, 82 points behind the Panthers in the Atlantic. Hurricanes, 1st place in the Metropolitan at 87 points. Avalanche, obviously dominating out there in the Central at 89. And then you got the Flames in 1st out there in the Pacific. So lots of good teams out there, man. The East is going to be a tough matchup this year, no matter who we draw in the playoffs. Obviously, if we have to play Florida, it's going to be tough if they are the home team, like we talked about before. Florida is a really good team at home. Really way better than last year. I think Florida's improved a ton, I think, over anybody in the NHL this year. Obviously, we knew Colorado would be good, but I think Florida's finally playing to their potential, and they're scoring a lot of goals. So if we have to match up against Florida, it is going to be a fun series come playoff time. Pretty much in the Atlantic, the 4 teams have solidified themselves with the Panthers, Lightning, Maple Leafs, and Bruins. So, Jake, anything around the league or in the division that we need to point out here before we close out the show?
Well, as you mentioned, keeping our eye on the seeding, mostly for the Atlantic Division specifically, because for the most part it's pretty set in stone. I mean, Columbus at 63 points are the next team out on the wild card. It's going to take a lot for them to catch up to anybody. Yep. So right now the Lightning would be playing Toronto if the playoffs started today. So. And you'd like to have that home ice advantage over a lot of your opponents, especially in the Atlantic Division, especially Florida. The Lightning are definitely not out of it by any means. Still a lot of hockey left. So Just got to try and stay consistent as you can. And it's going to be interesting, for around the league talk, what some of these teams do at the trade deadline. Because there's definitely some top tier teams that have a lot more cap space than the Lightning do. And they could be making some additions. So I'm interested to see what the Rangers do as well. They've been a team that kind of came out of nowhere a little bit, thanks to their goaltending, and they've been playing really well as of late. In Pittsburgh too. Pittsburgh's been on a run as of late. They've been playing some of their best hockey that they have all year. So it's going to be fun down the stretch here, getting ready to start talking about when we can get into clinching scenarios before you know it. And then you got the trade deadline next week, which hopefully we'll have some moves to talk about.
Yep, and I think that's all I have for the show tonight. Want to give a shout out to our listeners, our followers at RBLR Sports on all platforms of social media. We're on Instagram, Stitch, Spotify, YouTube, you name it, we're there. Drop us a like, drop us a comment. Please feel free to subscribe. Hit that subscribe button. We're trying to give you guys the best content we can. Obviously, the Bolts have been on a streak. The streak has happened. The losing streak, the slump is here. It's going to happen. Let's let it happen now. Let's not let it happen come playoff time. Cooper is still the coach we need. We do not need to fire John Cooper. I will reiterate that. We do not need to fire John Cooper. He's a great coach. Losing is going to happen. Like I said, it's glad it's not happening now. Happen now, not later. So, Jake, I'm going to give you the final word. Go ahead and take us home, man.
Hey, man, I'm excited for this last stretch of hockey here. I'm looking forward to the trade deadline. It's going to be a lot of fun. Make sure you stick it around right here on this podcast so you can hear about all the latest news. Don't forget to check out our store online too, and check out some of our awesome merch that we've got there for you guys as well. And then, we've got a lot of other fun content coming up here on RBLR with the Rays back, finally baseball back in season as well. So I'm excited about that. But hey, let's finish strong here on the NHL side of things and get ready for that three-peat, baby.
Thank you for tuning into this presentation by RBLR Sports. On your way out of the stadium, please remember to like and subscribe.